So tonight is Webinar Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Today's topic is how to beat your bowel and bladder blues. This webinar is brought to you by Can Do MS. My name is Krista Sipp, Associate Director of Programs at Can Do MS, and I will be your moderator this evening. I would also like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of this webinar series. Thank you. And our theme for the month of June is Bowel and Bladder. In addition to tonight's webinar, we have two more programs this month that will focus on bowel and bladder. But this slide will show you all of our offerings for the month. So please make sure to check it out and see what we have coming down the chute. We'd love to see you at another program later this month to continue the conversation. And then lastly, with us tonight, I would love to introduce our speakers. We have Stephanie Buxhoveden and Roz Kalb. Stephanie's based in Virginia and is an MS nurse practitioner, MS researcher, and is also diagnosed with MS. She provides what I would like to call a 360 perspective and is also the host of our Can Do MS podcast. So please make sure to check that out. Roz is a psychologist and has been working in MS for over 40 years, and she is also a senior programs consultant here at Can Do MS. So thank you to both of our coaches for being here tonight and providing us valuable information on the topic of bowel and bladder.
It's wonderful to see people from all over the country and also from Canada and Austria. I mean, it's just so exciting. And I want to say, if you're as fond as Stephanie after this program as I have been for a very long time, check out the podcast that I had the opportunity to do with Stephanie, where she told a lot of her story. And I think you'll find it as wonderful as I did. So tonight, we're going to give you some basics. Mostly Stephanie is going to give you basics because she is the nurse practitioner and expert par excellence in bladder and bowel. But we want you to leave understanding all the ways that MS can impact bladder and bowel, what the strategies are for managing those troublesome symptoms, but also, from my perspective, learn how to reduce the impact of those very challenging symptoms on your emotional well-being and your social life and your relationships. And we're going to start by asking you to give us some information so we know a little bit more about you and you know more about each other. What symptoms are you experiencing? This is a single choice question. Bladder symptoms, bowel symptoms, both, or neither, or unsure? So far, both is in the lead here. 53% of people are experiencing both. 6% of you aren't sure. And so I think this is a particularly important program for you to help you learn to recognize the ways MS can cause those problems. Which healthcare providers have you talked to about these symptoms? Your PCP, your MS provider, a nurse, a physical therapist, urologist or gastroenterologist, other, or nobody? MS provider and urologist or gastroenterologist are kind of leading the pack, but also primary care providers. I think the key thing to keep in mind here is that you just want to talk to the person that you're able and comfortable talking to. They will make sure you get to the right person. The most important thing for those of you who haven't talked to anybody is to pick somebody on your team you're comfortable with. And now I'd like you to do our one word activity just for the moment. Please share one word, and off color is fine. Please share one word that describes the impact of bowel and bladder changes, and put this in the chat. Disruptive, yes. Fearful, frustrating, stunned, nervous, aggravating, embarrassing, lots of and inconvenient, urgent, unpredictable. These are fabulous words, and I think you're going to get some very good strategies for how to get some of this under control and feel less of these very difficult, feel disgusting, yucky, inconvenient. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing so vividly how you feel about these symptoms. Okay, so you've given us information. Now it's time for Stephanie to give you lots of facts to help you get a handle on what's happening that causes these symptoms.
Yes, thank you, Roz. I did see somebody in the chat say, how do I turn this chat off? So if you're seeing the scrolling box, there should be an X, a red X at the top of the chat box. You might still get pop-ups, and you can hit the arrow next to the chat box and it should say show chat previews. You can uncheck that so it'll stop popping up on your screen. I know that can be distracting for some people, but hopefully this will be a very supportive and encouraging chat, because a lot of you said isolation is one of the most predominant things they're feeling. So a little bit about me before I launch into all the facts. I have had MS for 10 years. And incontinence was one of the very first symptoms I had. And it was actually probably the only symptom that would have convinced me to go see a healthcare provider. So this is something that I have struggled with. I will be the only person on camera today talking about incontinence and their experience with that. The rest of you are just in the chat. You can ask anonymous questions, no shame, no stigma, whatever you're comfortable with. So let's get into the facts. So the goal of a healthy bladder is to go when and where it's convenient. Seems pretty simple, right? Bladder symptoms are extremely common, and it's the first symptom for many people like myself. Pregnancy, childbirth, aging, and menopause also can impact bladder function. So you may not know what is causing your bladder dysfunction, right? We should also add prostate issues in that list as well. So really, the only way to tell if it's MS or if it's something else is to report those changes to your provider. Sometimes it's your MS provider, sometimes your primary care provider is the first step, and then they can help you dive into finding those causes and those solutions.
So you've answered in the chat a lot of reasons why healthy bladder function matters, but I think it's also important to know that you want to pay attention to bladder function, because when you're not emptying your bladder adequately, it increases your risk for urinary tract infections, which, in addition to being uncomfortable and annoying, cause flares of other symptoms. They impact your overall health. But as you said, it impacts self-esteem, self-confidence, your feelings about yourself. So that's also an important reason. And of course, bladder urgency and frequency can interfere with your sleep. And we all know fatigue is the most common symptom of MS, and you don't need any more things contributing to your fatigue. You may feel less productive at home or work because you're constantly focused on your bladder or having to interrupt activities to go to the bathroom. And we also know that concerns about bladder or bladder leakage or bladder frequency can impact comfort and confidence when you're having sex. And that's complicated enough without having to be worried about your bladder at the same time. And some people who talked about being isolated know exactly what this means, that you're so afraid of having an accident or being worried about where the bathroom is that you just don't go out and you get isolated from the world around you. And it also is important to know that changes in your bladder function can also complicate your bowels, because many people, when they're having urinary issues, stop drinking. Wrong answer. We want you to keep drinking lots of fluids in order to keep your bladder healthy, but also to avoid constipation.
So things that you need to talk to your provider about if you're experiencing. So with MS, you may have difficulty either holding the urine in your bladder until it's convenient to get to the bathroom. So that's I felt the sensation I need to pee, and by the time I'm processing it and trying to find a bathroom, I'm already leaking and I'm having incontinence. Then there's also a problem of you feel the urge to urinate, you sit down and you have trouble completely emptying the bladder when you get there, right? So the stream is weak, you're having trouble getting everything out, or you get up, you leave the bathroom, 5 minutes later, don't you know you have to pee again? That's that residual urine that your bladder's not able to squeeze out. And if it's not comfortable to urinate, then by all means, please tell that to your provider. The symptoms often are the same between a weakness and difficulty emptying and incontinence and overactivity, but basically it's urgency, it's frequency during the day. If you're waking up more than once a night, if you're always up and down to the bathroom at night, that's a big problem. Any incontinence, either a little bit of incontinence or big gushes of incontinence. And if you're getting recurrent urinary tract infections, that might be indicative that you're not fully emptying that bladder, because the urine that sits in there is like a stagnant pond and can grow bacteria and give you frequent UTIs. So we really need to know what the issue is. Is this an issue with emptying, or is this an issue with oversensing and overactive, overexcited bladder muscle? Because that's going to determine how we treat it. So now, lest you think this is solely about their bladder, we are going to talk a lot about bowel facts as well tonight. So it's important to know that a normal bowel pattern varies from person to person. Some of us go several times a day, some of us go 4 times a week, right? Everybody's a little bit different. So we're going to talk about how you know you're normal or not normal. Bowel changes are also extremely common in MS. And just like bladder, it can be an oversensing or undersensing of the sensory nerves. It can be a motor issue where your intestinal tract's not mobilizing your stool, or it can be a combination of the two. Just like bladder, it's also impacted by pregnancy, menopause, and aging. But just because it's common, don't ignore it. So let's talk about some bowel facts. So the most common bowel change in MS is constipation. Like I said, everybody's different, but we define constipation as the inability to have a bowel movement for several days, or less than 3 bowel movements per week. Another cardinal sign is that you're having dry, hard stools that are difficult or painful to pass. Bowel incontinence can also happen. It's most commonly caused by constipation, where you're so stopped up that when you finally pass stool, it becomes hard to control, or it leaks around the hardened stool in the rectum. So loss of bowel control can also occur because of the nerve fiber damages as well. So another thing, other than nerve damage and MS itself, there are also other things that cause constipation in MS patients. Limited physical activity. So we have the saying, if you don't move, your bowels won't either, meaning exercise really does make a huge difference in how regular you're able to pass stool. It's also a common medication side effect. So if you're having constipation, it might not be MS. It might be one of the meds you're on, and we need to adjust the doses. And again, if you're having urinary issues and limiting water because you don't want to pee all the time, then you're dehydrated, and that's going to cause hard stools that are difficult to pass.
Hey, Stephanie,
Yeah.
I saw a question about whether irritable bowel syndrome is common in MS, since we're talking about bowel issues. Can you address that?
Yeah, so IBS is a different thing than MS, but it can have a lot of the same effects as constipation. So for instance, in a little bit, I'm going to talk about constipation's effect on spasticity and bladder symptoms. That also applies to IBS because it is a big organ that's covered in nerves and muscles. A lot of them have overlapping symptoms. So if you have questions specific to IBS symptoms and MS as I go through some of this content, pop them in the chat. So not a direct cause, but obviously IBS is common. And in MS, you're going to see some MS patients with IBS as well.
So we're unlikely to be able to see or respond quickly enough to all the questions in the chat. If you have a very personal question about your own situation, like I saw one from somebody who's still experiencing burning, I would strongly suggest that you send that question to our website at Contact Us or Ask the Can Do team. And whether it's a question for Stephanie or a question for me, we will get those questions. So I'm sorry if we can't get to all the questions coming into the chat.
And we even got some great questions before the webinar even started. So I'm so excited that you guys have all these questions. So we'll try to address as many as we possibly can. So healthy bowel function matters. As with bladder problems, feeling out of control with your bowel function really has a high impact on your self-esteem, your sense of dignity, and your confidence just moving through your everyday life. Constipation, like I just mentioned, has an impact on our other functions. So it creates significant discomfort, right? If you're constipated, your belly hurts, you're having cramps, you're bloated, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, it interferes with your daily life, it affects your appetite. So if you're constipated, you're not as hungry. And like I said, sometimes we don't realize we're constipated until our spasticity gets worse. And like I mentioned here, this also gets worse with IBS. And if you're constipated, your abdomen is under a lot of pressure and that's squeezing down on your bladder. And so that's why with constipation, your bladder symptoms will get a lot worse too. So bowel and bladder hand in hand for sure. So things to talk to your doctor about: changes in your stool, frequency changes, any accidents. Again, if you're increased spasticity or stiffness in your legs, mention that. And any ways in which changing your bowel function, is impacting your day-to-day life. So Roz is going to take us to another poll.
So which activities in your life have been impacted by bladder or bowel symptoms? Single choice again, we're going to make you choose. Is it your work life, recreational activities, travel, sexual intimacy, all of the above, or other? And if you have other ways that it's impacting your life, please put that into the chat. All of the above. I'm not actually surprised by that. I'm sure you're not either, Stephanie. Everything is been added here. I'm not seeing what else. Oh, sleep is put in the chat, all of them. So yeah, these symptoms, which haven't gotten enough attention, I think, over the years, are clearly having a major impact on everybody's lives. So thank you for letting us know about that. What we want to do now that we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems and understanding where they come from is to talk about solutions.
All right. My favorite slide. All right. So these are our goals, right? So we have goals for bladder and we have goals for bowel. The number one thing is we want both to be predictable and convenient. So we want to prevent or minimize the episodes of constipation and incontinence whenever we can, so that you can be confident in assessing where your body's at, assessing your symptoms, and know what to do to intervene. So down here on the left, I have urine color. It's really hard to track how much water you're drinking a day, but we're aiming for that light straw color. Over on the right is what's called the Bristol stool chart. And I told Roz this, but they sell coffee mugs with the Bristol stool chart on them. So if you need a daily reminder of what we're aiming for, it's a type 4. It's a smooth, soft, easy to pass. Sometimes it's shaped like an S, it's shaped like your colon. We don't like type 1, the hard, lumpy stuff, and we don't like type 7 either, right? Liquid is very hard to keep in. So just to give you an idea, when you're in the bathroom, if you know what you're looking for and you can say, pat on the back, we did it. I'm a type 4 today. I'm glad to see everybody's sense of humor is intact.
Quick question, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Is it common for people's stools to vary among these from day to day, so that
Yeah, sure.
you shouldn't expect to get a perfect 4 every time, I assume.
I mean, it's always good to strive for perfection, but yes, the goal is easy, easy to pass, not painful, not too loose, not too hard, but a type 4 is
perfect.
what we're looking for. That's a good day, right? All right. So basically, it's not rocket science. There's no special diet for people with MS. It's fruit, fiber, vegetables, all the things you've been taught since elementary school, and healthy fats. So we're looking for about 20 to 30 grams a day. Water intake, same as any other human being. Just because you have MS doesn't mean you need to like aggressively hydrate, but also be mindful that you're not restricting your fluids, because if you restrict fluids, you're going to get constipated and your urine's going to become more acidic, and it's actually going to irritate the lining of your bladder. So if you're dehydrated and your concentrated urine is interfering with that, then your bladder is just going to become even more overactive because it's irritated. So it actually does the opposite. So again, it's hard to track water intake. You're aiming for that light straw colored. And exercise. I mean, I know we tend to say exercise cures absolutely everything, but it really is especially true for bowel and bladder.
Another quick question, Stephanie, about the types of fiber that are recommended. So somebody wrote that they were told they were taking the wrong type of fiber, and I think she mentioned flaxseed. So is fiber, or is there lots of different types that people
There's
should?
There's a lot of different types. You can aim to just get it through whole grains, through fruits and vegetables. You can try fiber powders. Sometimes the fiber powders make people crampy and they don't like them. Sometimes it's the best way for people to get it into their diet. So I think the bottom line is try to get it through your diet, through the foods you're eating as much as possible, and then tally that up and realistically how much you're actually getting per day, and then add a supplement, either a pill supplement, a powder that you add to drink or food, and just regular old fiber that you can get for like $2 at the grocery store. No need to do anything super fancy. And fiber helps both, by the way. Fiber helps if you're constipated. Fiber also helps if you're having diarrhea. So it's a binder, and it helps things move smoothly. And it also adheres to fats in the diet and helps everything move through a little bit easier. All right. So in terms of things to avoid if you have bladder issues and diet, so sugar and artificial sweeteners, particularly in sodas, in a lot of those fizzy drinks, will irritate the bladder. Caffeine, coffee, tea, and spicy foods and citrus fruits also irritate the bladder. So pay attention. It may or may not be a trigger for you. If you're like me and you can't survive without caffeine, you just accept that you're going to pee every 45 minutes in the morning, and that just is how it is because we need to be awake. But if I'm traveling or in the car or on a plane, I certainly won't drink coffee that day because I know that I will get into trouble, right? Schedule regular times to relax and allow your body to void. So the more stressed and nervous we get about our symptoms, the more our bowel and bladder symptoms get worse. Have you ever noticed that? You get into like the stress loop. So try to schedule times to relax and allow for the voiding, so that's maybe not such an anxiety provoking issue. And track your food and your hydration in a diary if you're really not sure what's a trigger or what helps or what doesn't help. Keeping a diary to help get to know your body is a great place to start.
So another question, Stephanie. So somebody's asking about neurogenic bowel, and I think neurogenic bowel is just a way to describe these symptoms that you're talking about that are caused by neurologic changes in MS.
Yeah.
Is that correct? There's nothing magical about it. That's what it is.
No, we call it neurogenic bladder as well. It just means there's something in the nervous system that's causing this, because the bladder and the intestines, they're all nerves and muscle, right? And so just like how people's legs can get weak from MS, the bladder muscles the intestinal muscles, they can also have issues with sensing when they're full and need to evacuate, or sending the signals to help peristalsis. So it's just same as every other muscle group, and we just call it neurogenic because we like to sound smart. So bowel management tips. We're going to talk a lot about tips for both. So the first thing you need to do is set yourself up for success. This starts in the morning. You're going to wake up, you're going to have a warm beverage, or if you're the type of person who wakes up hungry, you're going to have something hot to eat. And you're going to give yourself a gentle abdominal massage. I'm going to walk you through what that looks like. Now you've got your beverage, you've got your food. You're going to go to the couch first thing in the morning after enjoying those things, and you're going to sit with your knees above your hips. So I just sit on the couch, put my feet down on the couch with my knees above my hips for 15, 30 minutes, and I watch the morning news. Then the other tip I have for you is to breathe into your belly. And if you're a singer, you know what breathing into your belly feels like. If you ever watch an infant breathe and they breathe out of their bellies, or if you're not sure, if you lie flat on the ground, we naturally breathe from our bellies when we're lying flat. But basically, you want to breathe from here. And that relaxes your pelvic floor. It stimulates the intestinal muscles, and it increases pressure in the abdomen. So it's going to basically help you get that urge to go to the bathroom. So we're going to do all those things that's like a half hour in the morning. Hopefully it works. If it doesn't, don't strain, right? So if we strain on the toilet, if we're trying to force ourselves to go, we can cause big hemorrhoids, which can worsen the problem. You can even tear things, which is horrible and painful. And you can weaken your pelvic floor by trying to strain. So instead, when you're on the toilet, I want you to do that belly breathing again. Deep breaths in and out through your belly. And you're going to notice that the abdominal pressure is increasing, and it's going to be a much nicer and more pleasant way of getting things moving. But if nothing happens in 10 minutes, get up, try again when you have the urge. Don't force it. All right. So here's the famous squatty potty. It does help. Again, getting those knees above your hips. It puts you into a squatting position. It repositions the colon, and it can reduce strain. So if you don't have a squatty potty, you can get one. If you don't like the price tag, you can just use any regular stool that you have laying around the house and put it next to your toilet. Get those knees up. All right. And then, so next slide, we're going to walk you through a little abdominal massage, and Krista is going to put a link to the video we have on the Can Do MS website of how to do this. But this is how you do an abdominal massage. I like to do it laying in bed right before I go to sleep, or in the morning, or just as needed if I have issues. But basically, you want to do this gently. You don't want to go too hard. I'm going to move my camera down so you can see my belly. And you're just doing these 4 movements about 10 times. You're going to start down in the left quadrant and just do a 10, and then you're going to move your way up, and you're going to move your way across your abdomen, and then you're going to move down. You're basically just following the line of the colon and helping those muscles that are weak move that stool through the intestines. And again, we're going to link to a video that's much more comprehensive than that. All right, so finally, let's say the medicines don't work, the massage doesn't work, the watching the news with your knees high up isn't working. We do have medications we can turn to. It's important to note that you shouldn't use these things without talking to your doctor first, especially the stimulant laxatives, because if you overuse them, then you're basically teaching your body that it doesn't need to do what it needs to do, and then you get into this nasty cycle of basically becoming dependent on them. So that, with that disclaimer, they include oral medications, suppositories, and enemas. Timing's important. So you're going to take an oral medication if you have like 6 to 12 hours for it to work. So this is something that's a little gentler, takes more time, something you generally are taking before you go to sleep, and hopefully you wake up in the morning and have a bowel movement. Versus if you need more immediate relief, a suppository or an enema is going to give you that more immediate relief, but you have to plan for it, right? That's going to be a time when you're home and not about to go run errands, right? So we have stimulants here that are listed, and you have softeners. So if you're more constipated, you have those hard stools, then a softener will help lubricate things and bind it so that it's coming out easier. My go-to is this tea. It's called Smooth Move Tea. It comes in a variety of flavors. You steep it for about 10 minutes. You drink it at nighttime, and it usually works within 1 to 2 days. So, and if any of these over-the-counter medications are ineffective, we have prescription strength stuff as well. So this is a list of things to try, but there's still more if they do not work.
The other thing that's not on this list that goes back to my generation is simply prunes or stewed prunes in the morning, or dried apricots. And for some people, having that at night as a little mini disappointing dessert actually works overnight and helps. So if you haven't tried something simple like those dried fruits, I urge you to give them a try.
Chia seed pudding. Chia seed pudding is delicious and it works.
Wow.
All right, let's move on to bladder for a second. So if you have trouble emptying your bladder, so again, that's if you are urinating, you can't quite get everything out, you're getting up, 5 minutes later, you have to pee again, then you might have trouble with emptying. So again, we're going to time. So if you know that if you wait an hour and a half, you get incontinent, maybe we're going to go every hour, right? So scheduling and trying to time voiding will help train your bladder and help prevent incontinence. And then we can do something called double voiding. And I saw somebody already wrote in the chat that this works for them. It works for me as well. So you go, you urinate, stand if you're able to, walk around. I usually put the dishes away or go do something for 5 minutes, and then you go back, sit down, and get the rest of it out. If that's unsuccessful, we have intermittent self-catheterization. It's like physical therapy for your bladder. If medications aren't effective, this is a very easy, safe, and convenient option. I'm sure many of you in the chat are using intermittent self-cath, and hopefully those of you who are can write about your experience to everyone who's thinking about whether they should or not. But it really helps give you the freedom to be out and about. We just did a program last week with a lovely young woman who self-caths about 7 times a day. And it's the only way she can be a mom and work and live her life. It helps increase that confidence that your bladder function is under your control. You're no longer being controlled by your bladder. You are controlling your bladder. It's a wonderful tool. Again, I saw many people attesting to pelvic floor physical therapy. This can help with both bladder and bowel function, as well as sexual dysfunction. It's offered by physical therapists who specialize in it. I am not a physical therapist that specializes in it, but luckily we have a video from a PT who is, and again, Krista's going to pop that into the chat. So if this is something you're interested in, I don't have a ton of time tonight to go into it, but check out that video. And it basically uses biofeedback to help you and your therapist address your bladder wall, track improvements as you exercise, and you can really see the benefits paying off. And again, I know I already saw a few people say it's really helped them in the chat, which is great. So similar to bowel, we have lots of medication options. If lifestyle interventions and self-cathing aren't working, you can try some medications. We have different anticholinergics, which is just a very fancy way of basically saying they dry things up and help reduce that urinary frequency. And there's one medication called mirbetriq, which is a beta-3 agonist and helps with the bladder functioning as well. On the right side, these are over-the-counter options. So say you don't have bladder symptoms every single day, or you have no issue getting to a bathroom at work, or it's just not enough that you would take something every day for it, but you're going on a long car trip, or you're taking a flight, or you're going hiking, and you're worried about not having access to a bathroom for a short period of time, then you can try either the Oxytrol. This used to be a prescription medication that they now sell over the counter as a patch that you can put on. And Azo Bladder Control has an over the counter option as well that you can try out, see if it helps from time to time. We also have Botox. So as crazy as it might sound, you can inject Botox into your bladder and it helps with that overactive bladder. It does wear off just like Botox cosmetically. You have to go back every few months. You also have to do that with the bladder injections. And it is injections, so you do have some injection site tenderness sometimes, but it can help with those overactive symptoms as much as 40 to 60% decrease in the overactive frequency symptoms and 60 to 80% less episodes of incontinence with Botox. So it could be something to bring up. And timed voiding, again, we already talked about the double voiding, going regularly if you know that you have a problem if you go too long, making sure you're scheduling bladders emptying times.
So we've got a couple comments before we talk about exercise about people who are using e-stim for bladder. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have some InterStim devices that sit in the bladder and the urethra, and you use a magnet or something else to trigger it to open and help release. So that is a great option for patients who are not having success emptying their bladder in any other way. There's also a suprapubic catheter where they can put a catheter through the skin into the bladder and you empty it through a tube. It either goes into a bag or you empty it periodically. And that can be really useful for patients who either don't have the dexterity or ability to self-catheterize, or who are getting frequent infections with self-catheterization. The implanted catheter can sometimes be a wonderful option for those folks.
So as Stephanie mentioned before, exercise helps both bladder and bowel function. Now, we've learned in recent years that exercise actually helps everything. It helps your mood, it helps your cognition, it improves your sleep. And in addition to all those things that it does, it also helps your bladder behave the way it's supposed to and your bowel as well. So staying active is key. For those of you who sit in a wheelchair, a lot of the time that doesn't mean you can't be active. And I urge you to check out our Moves with Mandy on the website so you can see how you can sit in a chair, but also move parts of your body that help to keep everything flowing and moving the way it's supposed to. Kegel exercises, which you can learn from your physical therapist or your OBGYN or your nurse practitioner like Stephanie, those help with your pelvic floor and the muscles that you need for both healthy bladder and bowel function. Core work, like the kind of work that's done in Pilates and adaptive Pilates, where you strengthen and stabilize the core part of your body, helps as well. And even cardio, it's just getting yourself moving. And don't forget, if you're sitting in a chair, you can still get cardio. You don't have to go run a mile. You can do arm exercises and rotations and all kinds of things that get your heart rate up, even if you're not up and moving about. And general strengthening, whether it's your core, your legs, your back, all of those things contribute to you being able to manage the muscles that are involved in bowel function and in bladder function. So we just can't say it enough. Did I leave anything out, Stephanie?
No, I think you did a fabulous job. Now I'm reading all the comments that came in.
Okay, awesome. So with all of the things that are going on that make people feel uncomfortable or make them lose their self-confidence or their eagerness to be out in the world and with other people, I think avoiding isolation is a real challenge. And so all of the tips that Stephanie gave you today, I think can help you feel more confident, ready to try going out in the world again. But I think the other piece of it is that with friends and family, you need to speak up on your own behalf, right? These are just some suggested comments, but whatever works for you. The point is, this is not something that you're doing on purpose or that you're doing to make other people feel uncomfortable. This is a symptom of MS. And I think the more matter of fact you can be and the more clearly you can explain what's going on, the more confident you'll feel, and you'll put other people at ease as well. So I love summer picnics, but could we go to such and such park instead? Because they've got a handicap accessible facility that I could use, so I don't have to worry about going to the bathroom. And if somebody flexes with you and changes a plan or listens when you say you need to go somewhere where there's a bathroom or an accessible bathroom, just thank them. Just say thank you for understanding, and I really appreciate your support. So that's one way to begin avoiding some of that isolation. I think it's also important, and we've seen a lot about this in the chat, people have started to wear undergarments or clothing that helps them feel secure if they're worried about having an accident. And it's different kinds of pads or underwear for bladder or bowel function. But I think knowing that you're covered, so to speak, can just help you feel less panicky and more confident. You always want to have an emergency kit, change of underwear, change of clothing, keep it at work, keep it in the car, keep it at your best friend's house. But make sure that you've got that sort of safety net for yourself so you don't have to be worried about it. If you're an event, a family event or a kid's event, and you need to feel free to be able to go home when you need to go home, make sure you have your own car or your own way of getting back to where you need to be. And as Stephanie talked about, you always want to have a plan, right? So you want to have a plan for your treatment strategies, but you also want to have a plan so that you don't have to worry all the time about where the bathroom is. So we have a very close colleague, Stephanie and I. He's been in the MS field even longer than I have. And when he used to give presentations, he's a neurologist, and when he used to give presentations about bladder and bowel function, he showed a slide which had a car driving on a highway and all those big green highway signs that are up above your head as you're driving along the interstate all said, bathroom, bathroom, bathroom. You need to know where the rest stops are before you start on your trip. You need to know who's got accessible bathrooms. And now, of course, there's an app. So you can always have an app on your phone that tells you where the nearest bathroom is. So be prepared. I love all the stuff that's coming up here.
Such good comments.
Okay, so before we go into Q&A, we'd really like you to do a little more of what you've been doing. Just take a minute to share your tips for managing your symptoms on the go. When you're out of the house or in a car or going to an event, what do you do? And what is the name of the bathroom app? Hold on.
Flush in the chat. I've seen one called Toilet Finder, I think, if you search the web, and it depends on what country and city you're in, but you can usually find something local. I also like to research, like before I mentioned to somebody's here from Austria. I'm going to Austria next week, but I look up, like, where are the public restrooms? Do I have to pay to get into them? Like this might not be an issue I'm running into, but it makes me feel better to know where I would run to if I needed to run there.
So I found 3 apps. One is called Flush, one is called Toilet Finder, and another is called Flush Pro.
You gotta love the internet.
You gotta love the internet.
I think there's a new one too that rates handicap accessibility.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, which is awesome. Awesome. RunP is an app for movie times. That's hilarious. So it tells you the best time during the movie to run to the bathroom.
that one I had not heard of.
Yeah, somebody needs a place to stay. So they got an RV so that they have a mobile bathroom at all times, you know? I've thought about that. I'm not gonna lie.
In the support partner groups I do, we've had many support partners talk about biting the bullet and getting an RV, because then they could travel in a relaxed
Yeah.
way, and the bathroom is right there, and it just ends all of that having to stop every, 20 minutes or half an hour. So
Yeah.
awesome. So you don't have to do this alone. Not everybody is as fabulous as Stephanie, and not every provider is as open and engaging talking about these things. But it's important to know that all of the providers on the screen have something that they can offer to help you with bladder and bowel. So obviously, you might want to start with your MS provider, either a neurologist or nurse practitioner. Bring up the subject, because they can either address it or refer you to the right specialist. Urologists do assessment and management of bladder problems. And oh, by the way, if you're a man, they also do work with sexual dysfunction. So the urologist is a great resource. Gastroenterologists can help with constipation and other bowel issues. Nurses, of course, and physical therapists, they can answer all the questions that came into the chat. What kinds of exercises are appropriate for you? How are ways to adapt exercise that meet your abilities and needs? And the specially trained physical therapists can help you with pelvic floor physical therapy. Occupational therapists as well help by providing tools, not just the squatty potty, but other kinds of tools that you can use for comfortable elimination or comfortable seating in the bathroom. And don't forget the folks like me, the mental health professionals, because so much of this takes a real emotional toll. It causes stress, depression, anxiety, and the mental health professionals in your team can really help with some of that as well.
Absolutely. So speak up. I hope you got at least one tip from tonight that shows you that your bowel and bladder symptoms can be successfully managed. Don't tolerate being uncomfortable. Don't just stay at home and not speak up about it and just think, well, I have MS and this is my life now. Or this is something everybody my age deals with. It's probably just my prostate. If it's impacting your life and your ability to do the things you love, talk to your provider. If they don't ask you, bring it up. Because the earlier you seek treatment for it, the more effective the treatment will be, and the sooner you can get your life back on track.
So Roz and Stephanie did a great job of answering some questions live as they were coming in, but we do have a lot of other questions that I would like to try to get to in the few minutes we have left. So one, we talked a lot about constipation, but what about diarrhea and loose stool? Any strategies to help with that?
Yeah, you can definitely take as needed Imodiums. Again, fiber works very well for both. If you're having frequent episodes of diarrhea and they're not mixed with constipation, because it can be confusing. If you're constipated and you have a big plug of stool, some people actually see like liquid coming around and seeping through. So just be sure you're not also having constipation, because it can look like it's confusing. It can look like diarrhea. Bring it up to your provider. But fiber works well. Really looking at your diet and keeping a diary to try to figure out if it's something you're eating that's triggering it, or just like with constipation, a lot of medications can cause that. So NSAIDs, a lot of the different like baclofen, and pretty much every medication on the market says this could cause diarrhea, right? So look at your med list really carefully with your provider as well. Those would be where I would start. And then if the problem persists, then definitely get a GI consult. Go to a gastroenterologist, because when you're having constant diarrhea, there's not much you can do to keep it in other than wear a pad, and it's incredibly frustrating. I feel your pain.
So I just saw a comment, Stephanie, that came in that said, I think it said, my neurology provider said my incontinence is not related to MS. Should I be worried? But it didn't mention whether it was bladder or bowel. So I'm gonna just say that incontinence is not something that you should have to deal with. So If your neurology provider says it's not related to MS, although I'm not sure how one could be sure of that, I think I would recommend going back to your PCP, primary care doctor, and saying, look, this is happening. What are the possible causes for it in addition to MS? But I believe I heard Stephanie say early on, you may never know exactly what's causing it. Is it aging? Is it medications? Is it menopause? Is it MS or something else? But you still need to help managing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bottom line.
What about probiotics? Is there a benefit to taking probiotics?
Probiotics can help. In terms of whether probiotics are good for people with MS, the jury is still out. There's a lot of research going on with the gut microbiome that people with MS have high levels of unhealthy bacteria and low levels of healthy bacteria. And it's hypothesized that probiotics could help balance the gut microbiome. Nothing proven yet, nothing hard and fast, no guidelines that everybody should be following as of now, but this is something that is being looked at. And so definitely worth talking to your doctor to see if maybe that could help regulate some of the bowel problems.
Great, thank you for that information. What about Miralax? A number of people asked if that is safe to take daily.
Yes, Miralax is a good supplement to use. Anything with laxative effects. Again, you don't want to overuse laxatives, but if it's a fiber supplement, anything that you can get in your diet or in nature is fine. But before you take a laxative product, just mention it to your doctor first.
Great. Awesome. And are there any ways to spot early signs of UTI?
Yeah, so especially in women, we don't always get the classic burning sensation. UTIs can cause burning. It can cause discomfort in the bladder itself after you pee. You might feel like aching. It can cause a smell. So if you're noticing your urine has a weird color or a weird smell, that can be a tip off. But a lot of us don't get any symptoms, even frequency. Like if you're going all the time and it's little tiny amounts. And the only tip we have that we have a UTI is that our MS symptoms are exacerbated. Right. So we almost feel like we're having a relapse. And so that's why one of the first things that happens when you call your neurologist and say, I think I'm having a relapse, is they make you go pee in a cup, because it's that common for a silent UTI to occur. So be in tune with your symptoms. If you feel like I'm flaring, something's off, that could be a UTI.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I see people saying, why do I have pain when urinating, but no infection? That's a hard one to answer because you shouldn't have pain. So I would definitely see a urologist or a gynecologist about that, just to make sure they're not missing anything.
Thanks for jumping on that one. Appreciate it. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. Roz, this one might be good for you because I know you've worked with a lot of support partners, but Stephanie, you have a great support partner. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts. How can support partners help with bowel and bladder issues?
So for me, I think that the answer is first to stay calm, to get educated. So ask questions. What does it feel like? What happens? When did this change happen? In an open and accepting way, which can be hard when you're worried about this new and troubling symptom. I think it's also very, very helpful to read your partner's body language and listen to their words. If your partner says, I need to pee, you say, okay, let's go find a place. Let's stop the car. Let's leave the plate. Let's do whatever. So you're not questioning it. You're not denying the need. You're being supportive and helping them get what they need. I think that humor is always helpful if humor is something that you and your partner use in your relationship. Humor can feel painful and degrading if you're not ready for it. But if humor is something that you as a couple use all the time to manage the challenges of life with MS. This is just one area where having a sense of humor can help you get over a rough patch. And when these accidents happen or these crises occur, the tendency may be to wallow in them, to dwell on them, to have it ruin your whole day or your whole outing. And I think the best thing a support partner can do is to help you move on. Okay, that happened. It was shitty, pardon the pun. But let's focus on what we came here to do, which was to have some fun. They can become your best cheerleader, your best support when they understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think we have two sayings: nothing ventured, nothing gained. Somebody wrote that they like to get out in nature and there's no bathrooms there, so they carry stuff and go in the woods. Me too, girl. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I also have another mantra when I'm having a really high anxiety day. Say I'm at a professional event. I'm not surrounded by anybody who understands what I go through. I say to myself, do it scared, because I'd rather go and do something scared and potentially have to go home than to not go at all. So I hope that you all feel a little more empowered to do the same thing. And again, the partners, the best thing my husband does for me is we build in time knowing that I'm going to have to stop, and so that we're never late. And if I say, I need to go, he knows, like, he is pulling that car so fast towards the next McDonald's or whatever we can find, right? Like, he gets it, even though he's never experienced it himself. And that is just like such a stress reliever, that I have somebody that I don't have to explain or apologize to about this.
There was just a question in the chat about finding mental health professionals who know about MS. I think your best starting place is to call the National MS Society. It's that 1-800-344-4867 number, and just say that you are looking for a mental health provider who is familiar with MS in your area, and they can also help you connect to mental health professionals who provide therapy virtually if you don't have folks in your area.
That's great. Thank you for that tip. And thank you guys both for answering as many questions as we could get through in that time. I really appreciate it. So the webinar is over, but we hope you'll stay connected with us. Here's a handful of ways that you can do so. And next webinar Wednesday will be about shared decision making, your choice, your MS, your choice, your voice. So please join us then. We'd love to see you again. And lastly, thank you to our sponsors. We will have a survey pop up momentarily, so please take that survey and give us your feedback. But first, have a great night. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Stephanie and Roz for being here, and be well.